Joining me in Minneapolis, Minnesota, attorney and former radio host Roshini Rajkumar. Roshini, good to see you. Welcome back to the program. Tell me what you thought of the cross of this witness. I know we just saw a portion of it, but it was very, very aggressive at times. What did you think?
Yeah, you know, that aggression to me says this defense attorney is confident, is really trying to knock that investigator sort of off his calm and really try to poke some holes in the prosecution's case. So it's definitely a tactic. It's part of that strategy by the defense.
Did you think at the end of the day the defense really scored any points with this detective through the cross?
You know, I don't know about that because overall, if you just kind of look at the whole totality of this situation, and it is just striking that a death happened in this situation, and the fact that the defendant is a retired police officer, it seems like he kind of went from 0 to 60 way too fast. So I'm curious what the defendant may say in the defense's case if he does take the stand.
Right, and let's talk more about that, because I know in some of this cross, defense counsel was able to draw out through the detective that when he turned on that recorder and did tape part of the interview, Curtis Reeves told him that he was afraid of Chad Olson, that he was in fear of him. And so that's definitely something that is supportive of the defense case, as we know that this shooting was because Reeves was in fear of his life, either dying right then and there or being seriously injured by Olson. So whether or not he takes a stand is tricky. Tell me, Roshini, how do you see it? Do you see this being something that could really help Curtis Reeves' case if he decides to testify in his own defense, or do you see it as potentially more harmful than good and he should avoid it?
Yeah, it's a tough one, Julie, because if you remember the one witness in the theater, and when he was asked by the prosecution, what did you overhear Curtis Reeves saying after the popcorn was thrown? And it almost sounded sarcastic. Oh, throw popcorn at me. So it really does kind of get at that credibility of Curtis saying he really feared for his life and those kinds of things, because he had the wherewithal to sort of sound sarcastic and know what was going on there. I am always in favor of defendants taking the stand, especially so that they can show maybe there's some remorse, maybe they can show, hey, I'm a human being and I don't want other people speaking for me. So this is a tricky one because the very fact that he's a retired police officer also puts him in kind of a heightened status. He's not just the regular Joe in a movie theater and got into this altercation and really feared for his life. So that's a tricky one, and I'm very curious, and I'm trying not to be subjective in that I want to see Curtis Reeves take the stand, so I'm not exactly sure what the defense's strategy would be on that one.
Right. Roshini, let's say just for the sake of our analysis on this program that he does decide to make the decision to give testimony in his own defense. Can we talk about his demeanor for a moment, kind of also incorporating what one of the witnesses said she thought about him a couple days ago when we had one of the eyewitnesses on the stand. I believe it was Tuesday, was the day of all the eyewitness testimony. And she said that he reminded her of Grumpy from Grumpy in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And so that being said, you know, that's one of those things, like it was a comment that I'm sure she didn't think much about, but we're still talking about it days later. It caught the attention of viewers watching this case at home, tweeting us, things like that. So if you're Curtis Reeves, and you know that he heard it said about him, how do you think he might need to adjust or be more cognizant of his demeanor on the stand in light of what that witness said?
Well, look, Curtis Reeves needs to come across like grandpa, not grumpy, in order to get some sort of feeling from this jury. So he really has to be as transparent as possible. He has to seem sympathetic. He can't come across as gruff. So this is where his demeanor is going to either win or lose the day for him, Julie. It is so important that Curtis Reeves, if he does take the stand, comes across like a human being, and again, more like grandpa than grumpy.
Yes, yes. Well said, Roshini. Definitely needs to embrace a grandpa. Maybe he is one, not sure. But I think even with all the police training in that, he's got to just come off as a really nice, soft, older gentleman. It's great that he served in law enforcement. That certainly should be brought up. I think jurors largely would respect that. But yeah, got to get away from the grumpy characterization that fell upon him this week with that eyewitness. So much more to talk about with him. Roshini, you're going to stay with us. Thank you so much. And thank you at home. I'm going to bring in a guest on the program today who happens to live and work in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Attorney and former radio show host Roshini Rajkumar is with us today. Roshini, I know you followed the state case very, very closely for Derek Chauvin. Really, since this incident occurred, this is something you've talked about on your radio show. You know many of the players involved. What is the sense like in the Twin Cities here and now at this stage of the proceedings where we're in the federal case for the other 3 officers?
Well, it's a little less dramatic from the spring case for Derek Chauvin in the state. And as you recall, all of that was televised in state court. It was in Minneapolis. The courthouse was very barricaded. And I know your cameras were there and you showed everybody that. In St. Paul, they have blocked things off as far as closing off a lot of the courtrooms and the courthouse, but not to the same level of what we saw during the Chauvin trial. Also, because there are no cameras allowed in these federal courts in St. Paul, I personally believe that's part of the reason why some of the drama that we felt earlier in 2021 for Chauvin's trial is not happening with this trial. However, there's still that sense of the emotion, the trauma, all of that continues to come back and gets revisited, Julie, because this was such a tough time for Minnesota, for the Twin Cities. And here we are, it's 2022, and we're still talking about those events of May 2020. So there's that drama around it. But as Julia pointed out, this is a very high bar for the prosecution to have to prove that willfulness, not just an oversight, but they willfully were against or didn't look at and respect the rights of George Floyd. That's a really high bar. So it is a tough case for the prosecution, especially when you hear from these defendants individually. And based on, I guess we don't get to see them in court, but based on what we understand they're saying and the transcripts, they seem to be believable witnesses for themselves. So I think this is a good case for all of the defendants to take the stand in their own defense and show the public who they are and what was actually going through their minds at the time.
Roshini Rajkumar in Minneapolis on the program today. Thank you so much for all of that. We're going to squeeze in a break. When we come back, we're going to talk. Oh boy, this is some news. Let me bring in for some discussion now attorney and former radio host Roshini Rajkumar. She's standing by in Minneapolis. Roshini, I'm sure you remember this trial. This was not too long ago. We broadcast this one on Court TV. We got to watch the defendant take the stand. You told us a little while ago that you love it when you see defendants take the stand, and here didn't bode so well for Lynn Lee. We know the jury convicted her. What do you think of this defamation suit now?
Well, this is just crazy, Julie. I don't even know where to begin with this. I was on with Court TV back when she was on trial, and it was actually interesting watching her on the stand because she was one of those who maybe they should have thought twice about putting her on the stand. This is very interesting. It seems like her case is just kind of the gift that keeps on giving, talk show hosts, because it just seems so crazy. And then she's only asking for $25,000, which maybe there's some sort of limitation in her state statutes, but that doesn't even seem like very much. So I don't really know what to make of this. I don't know if she thinks this is going to help somehow get her out of prison anytime sooner, but it just seems kind of crazy. And I think she's got a lot of time in prison right now to maybe think about how she lives her life. I don't know that she can really make the best case to the state that she is the most fit mother right now. I'm just saying from the outside on this one, Julie.
Oh, I think your observations are spot on, Roshini. One of our excellent line producers here at Court TV, Eric Goldson, said the same thing about the amount of the damages requested when we were having one of our editorial meetings this morning. Like, if you're going to sue, 25,000. You would think should go a little bigger. But the big problem I see, And our viewers love this stuff when we talk about the law and what's needed in order to substantiate a lawsuit like this. I always say anybody can file a suit. We know, but whether or not they're successful is something else. When you have defamation, the statement's gotta be false. So here, right, Roshini, I would say, so what about all the other evidence and all the other witnesses and the jury finding you guilty, Lindley Renick, of a murder of your poor husband, and so you're worried about your reputation because of what the boyfriend said about you? You're lucky he didn't say more. That's how I see it.
Thanks for taking us back to the law. That's true. In any defamation suit, truth is a complete defense. But you're sitting in jail filing this lawsuit. It's almost like she wants this whole trial retried. I mean, but I don't know that defamation lawsuit is the way to go with that.
Right. I mean, it's just, okay, Lindley Renick. I mean, she's not going anywhere anytime soon. That case was just horrible. And all of the evidence, I mean, and one of the other things that came up during the trial, let's remember, allegedly, according to her friend who also testified against her, gave some very damaging testimony, I believe her name was Ashley Shaw, if my memory serves me correctly. There was an attempted poisoning that didn't work, so that Ashley Shaw told the court that Lindley tried to kill her husband by poisoning him, and that was unsuccessful. And so then they employed that Michael Humphrey, who was the co-defendant who gave testimony, and he made the deal after he was already convicted, which was like so backwards to me. He decided, well, let me help the prosecution find the murder weapon and give testimony, but he was already locked up behind bars. So this is just such a strange one, the way it's playing out. And I can see that we have some action in the courtroom. I was looking at a monitor to my side there. The judge is back on the bench in Florida. But Roshini, just to kind of wrap this up with this case with Lindley Renick, do you see any kind of viability with this suit just based on what we know today?
I don't. I really don't. I mean, it just, unless there's some stack of evidence somewhere, I just don't really understand this case. What I do predict, however, Julie, is this is going to be a Lifetime movie in about 3 to 5 years. Her story.
Roshini, thank you so much. Appreciate that. And you're